JJ's mailbag is back. And you guys brought the heat. What's up, everybody? It's JJ Buckets, naturally. Of course, it's JJ's mailbag, so JJ has to do the mailbag. Yeah, today's content is pretty simple and straightforward, but I love doing these. So I asked you guys to send in your hot takes, questions, predictions, anything of the sort over social media. I made a community post about it on YouTube. I also share it on IG asking for these, so I take the best ones and I feature them in video. Pretty simple and straightforward, but such a good time doing it. Now, before I fully hop into things, just if you like the content here today, drop a like, it goes a long way for me, and just make sure you're subscribing to the channel if you're new here. The road to 1K marches on, and slow march at times, but we'll get there. So without further ado, let's hop into the video. The first one here comes from my man, the Ward's Report. Shout out to you. And he says, if the Raptors manage to avoid the Nets and 76ers, they will make the Eastern Conference Finals. I find it interesting that, the Nets are kind of thrown in there. I mean, realistically speaking, that could be a play-in matchup, so the Raptors would avoid them in a sense where they don't actually get them the actual playoffs. The 76ers I completely understand because we're talking Joel Embiid and a top-tier center. Obviously, the Raptors, their biggest hole on the roster would still probably be the big man position, and being able to guard somebody like that for an entire playoff series, and somebody obviously as talented as an MVP candidate in Joel Embiid could be tough. I do think there are other teams that can out the Raptors here. Let me kind of backtrack a little bit and say, could I see the Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals? Believe it or not, I could. Don't get me wrong, for the most part, I still look at this as a developmental year for the Raptors. This is a year for the Raps to get their young guys some playoff experience, and I think at the end of the day, you'd be happy even with a hard-fought, first round series and exit there. I think ideally you probably want to get at least to the second round, just kind of get your guys as many reps, and as many looks in this playoffs as possible. So there are definitely more favorable matchups for the Raptors, but this is the one where, I do think there's other teams that are going to out the Raptors if they meet up. I know there's been some regular season success in matchups with the Miami Heat and the Milwaukee Bucks, but I don't think come playoff time those are going to be easy outs for the Raptors, and particularly the Bucks. I know there's a little rivalry between Toronto and Milwaukee fans and everything like that, and even I guess the teams to some extent too, although I think it's more between the fans than it is actually between the teams. But I do think the Bucks don't get the respect that they deserve sometimes, and I don't want to say I'm sick of it, but put some respect on their names. They're the defending champions, and quite frankly, I think if you put a, drastic scenario here, but gun to my head, if you ask me, for a finals prediction at this very second, I do think I would actually go for a finals rematch of last season. Probably leaning towards CP3, Devin Booker, and the Phoenix Suns to actually take it this year. That's obviously assuming that, the Suns are healthy and CP3 is healthy by then, but the Suns have been the best team in the league all year, so they'd probably be my champion pick at this point. And I do think the Bucks are the favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference. I know the Raptors have had some success dealing with Giannis, but this isn't the same Giannis that, you shut down when you had your all-time defense, and this isn't the same supporting cast that you could kind of get away with building that wall in front of Giannis and asking guys like Eric Bledsoe to beat you shooting the ball, right? I do think this Bucks team is better than that team, and I do think this Bucks team overall is better than the Raptors, as much as, that might not be fun to hear. And, I think a team like that genuinely could also out Toronto. I do think a team like Miami, that just has such great chemistry and cohesion, and for the most part has struggled to be healthy all year. I think a healthy Miami team is a scary Miami team, and they could definitely make a postseason run that would obviously involve knocking off the Raptors. So I do it. So to kind of bring my thoughts all together on this, do I think the Raptors can make the Eastern Conference Finals? Yes, but I don't think the Sixers and the Nets are the only two teams you probably want to avoid in those scenarios. Realistically, there's at least a couple more teams that would probably send the Raptors home packing. Sticking with the theme of the playoffs, Josh asks, what is the most favorable matchup for the Raptors in the first round? Now, at this point, the Eastern Conference is genuinely still so tight. Between seeds like 1 to 7, there's not a lot separating many of those teams. So, I'm gonna give you, in terms of like realism of who can slide up where, like there's still a lot that can happen, but realistically, if there's a way that you could face Cleveland in the first round, that's probably your most favorable matchup. But if we're going for something a little bit closer to what we see in the standings now, I think the best case scenario for Toronto in all likelihood is seeing Chicago slide up to number 3, and then obviously with that you slide up to number 6, and that's your first round matchup. Now, why Chicago? Man, first of all, let's acknowledge that this would be an emotional series for Raptors fans, because obviously we would see our boy, the former Raptor, DeMar DeRozan, in the first round. All that being said, and all that put aside, I do think Chicago is the most favorable matchup because kind of when you look at the roster, like top to bottom, when they're healthy at least, like this is a nice team with a cohesive lineup and a lot of good pieces there. But outside of, you know, DeMarvelous DeRozan, who's having an MVP year, and a good co-star in Zach LaVine, like I don't think this roster as a whole really terrifies you in a playoff series. Like I know there's a lot of good role pieces. You know, you got quality players like Vucevic, however you pronounce that. I always forget with him. And obviously you have talented guys like Lonzo Ball, you have Alex Caruso. I can't even remember how to pronounce his last name, speaking of pronunciation problems. But Io, the rookie there, and just a bunch of like, you have a bunch of talented players on that team, don't get me wrong. Like, the Bulls are a very good team, but at the end of the day, when you're looking at some of the other matchups in terms of, you know, Giannis Antetokounmpo and the defending NBA champions, or the Miami Heat with an even more kind of cohesive lineup and probably a little bit deeper in terms of the Miami Heat with obviously Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, and all the role players that they have around them. When you're looking at obviously the 76ers and the prospects of guarding Joel Embiid, again, MVP candidate for a whole series, I think the Bulls probably give you the most favorable window there. Like obviously there's the Celtics too, but with how good they've been in the second half of the season, I don't think you want to see Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the first round. I do think the Bulls are your matchup because while DeMar DeRozan has been fantastic this year, and you know, Zach LaVine is a very good running mate for him, I think of the potential guys and the potential players and even like coaches, etc., that you could see in the first round. The Bulls probably give you the biggest shot to just make it out of the first round. Again, outside the Cavs, but you know, the Cavs would really have to catch fire and somebody kind of would have to really slow their pace for the Cavs to move up to the 6 and the Cavs to move up to the 3 and the Raptors to get to the 6. But in terms of where the seeding is a little more realistic, I think the Bulls give you your best chance, you know, to scheme a good series, have your guys, a couple of your guys really take off in that series, and all of a sudden the Raptors could easily be in the second round. So I'm going to say the Bulls is the most realistic matchup that you would probably want to see in the first round. Scottie Barnes, greater than Evan Mobley for Rookie of the Year. Cavs won't have much of an argument if the Raptors pass their record this season. Well, that's obviously been kind of the topic and of the day, or flavor of the month. That's the expression that I'm looking for. The Rookie of the Year race, it's tight. And quite frankly, this is probably the best Rookie of the Year race that we have had in a really long time. Definitely one of the best ones that I have been alive for, and it has been just such a joy to watch. And it's not just Mobley and Scotty. I think Cade really has his case too. I think those three guys have had such tremendous rookie years and have just been such a pleasure to watch. And god damn, the league is in such good hands with the talented young players that we have from this year's rookie class. So I am so excited. And obviously in particular for the Raptors, because we have one of those rookies. And speaking of that rookie and his rookie of the year case, I do kind of agree that a lot of the strength of Mobley's case has been from how good the Raptors have been, and obviously from how good that he has been defensively. And I know a lot of the Raptors fans, from what I've seen on social media, have just been looking at like the base numbers for Evan Mobley in terms of like the blocks and the steals, and they're just like, man, by comparison to Scotty defensively in terms of those numbers, like there's not really a massive difference. But I will genuinely say, I think if you watch Evan Mobley, I think if you look at the advanced numbers, like defensively, Evan Mobley is as good as the narrative kind of paints him to be, and I see why people are excited about him on that end. It is really interesting though, because I don't know, I can't really remember the last time that the Rookie of the Year race was made on, you know, somebody's defensive prowess. So that is an interesting case there to me. But I do want to say I more or less tend to agree that if the Raptors pass the Cavs in the standings, I think if you're looking at both Scotty and Evan, Scotty looks more impressive, especially considering what he's doing for the Raptors in the role that he's had. Because realistically speaking, when everybody's fully healthy, Scotty's been what? The fourth, the fifth option on this team. So when you bear that in mind and you look at the numbers and you look at some of the games that he's managed to have and just some of the fun moments where he just has not looked like a rookie, right? I do, like, obviously there's Raptors bias here, but I do think Scotty should have the strongest case if the Raptors end up finishing with a better record than the Cavs. Obviously, Cade is in the discussion as well. He has been phenomenal for the Pistons ever since kind of mending up from his injury early on. And I think Cade will be a menace and a threat for years to come, as long as you get him some good running mates there in Detroit. But as far as the Rookie of the Year race goes, if it's a better record for the Raptors, looking at what Scotty has been this season, I do think it should be his race to lose. Sebastian wants to know, why did LeBron try to kill Scotty? For those of you who don't know, though I'm sure most Raptors fans have seen it, LeBron had that play in that Lakers game against the Raptors where he just tried to decapitate Scottie Barnes with the basketball. Now, why did he try to do that? Man, LeBron is old and he is bitter that, you know, one of his last, I guess, few years here is being wasted on team success-wise. Probably one of the worst seasons he's ever had in his career. Worst season that he's had since like his rookie year. So he's a bitter old man that was taking his frustrations out on our rook, and that is not okay. LeBron James, do better. James Harden and Joel Embiid are gonna bump heads in the playoffs, and they will be a second round exit. Now, I do think there's a chance, obviously, that the Sixers get knocked out in the second round. Like, the Eastern Conference is very talented, and there's a lot of good teams in this conference, which is why I think, you know, if they're gonna get bounced in the second round, that's gonna be the reason. I don't necessarily attribute to the thought that Joel Embiid and James Harden are going to bump heads. Realistically speaking, I actually, like from the get-go, I really liked the fit of Harden and Embiid, and I think they are a good fit together. I think Joel Embiid has been so starved for that, you know, incredibly talented perimeter player in his, you know, entire career that he is just gushing at the thought of playing with James Harden. Now, obviously, this isn't, you know, the very best prime James Harden, like from the Houston days where he was absolutely backpacking teams and he was putting up stat lines of like 40-point triple-doubles and nobody was batting an eye, 50-point triple-doubles, and everybody was like, man, that's just another day at the office for James Harden. This isn't that James Harden, but this is still a very talented James Harden. Obviously, he's had injuries and he's had the issues with the hamstring that I think have hindered him more than anything. And his play style just kind of, you know, doesn't necessarily, you know, bode well with that, having those injuries. But to go back to the original point here, if the Sixers are a second round exit this year, I don't think it will be for the reasons of them clashing heads. I think Embiid and Harden work together great. I think the issues will just be that there's a lot of talent in the Eastern Conference, and anybody can take a series from anybody as soon as you get to that second round. Finally, Giannis is being slept on for MVP. He's right there with Jokic and Embiid. Prove me wrong. So, I'll actually do you one better. Embiid is not there with Jokic, and I'll get to that in a second. Do I think Giannis is being slept on? Yeah, maybe a little bit. He's obviously had the back-to-back MVPs not too long ago, like literally just, a season removed from last year. So is there a little bit of voter fatigue with Giannis that kind of maybe isn't giving him the biggest spotlight? Yeah, I think so. I think that's always kind of been the case with MVP. Voter fatigue has definitely hit guys in the past, like a LeBron James, like a Michael Jordan. In this case, I think Giannis is suffering from a little bit of voter fatigue. That being said, why I don't think he's necessarily being slept on, and why I already kind of think the MVP is decided in my books, is that I just think Nikola Jokic is the MVP, and frankly, I don't really think it's that close. Now, I understand that historically speaking, the MVP tends to go to somebody, on one of the top seeds. Basically, the best player on one of the best teams has kind of been how the MVP has been voted on, and there have been exceptions to that rule, like a Russell Westbrook, who obviously had that insane triple-double season where he broke Oscar Robertson's record, and everybody kind of made that exception for him on a lower seed. And I do think the exception will be made for Nikola Jokic here as well. And his case is just so simple, but it's simple, but at the same time there's a lot of intricacy to it in terms of the advanced stats really scream at you for Jokic. Now, it's been a while since I've checked these numbers, so I might be a little off of the exact kind of ratings here, but I do remember last time that I was kind of looking at it. Nikola Jokic's on-off numbers are absolutely insane. The Nuggets are one of the best teams in the NBA when he is on the court, and they are one of the worst teams in the NBA when he's off the court. And I just think that speaks to what you can already see with the eye test. The Nuggets are not a talented roster. I mean, when Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are healthy, that's a damn good team. But I mean, obviously they haven't been healthy, and they haven't been there for, Porter was there for a little bit, but for most of the year, Jokic hasn't had either of those two guys. And the Nuggets are in such better seeding than they have any business being. That roster, with all due respect to those guys that are obviously professionals, that is not a good roster. That is not a good roster. And Nikola Jokic, on top of obviously having the gaudy numbers, has just been dragging that team all year. That is Giannis being slept on in the sense that, he might deserve to be a little bit closer to Embiid than I think people give him credit for? Yes. But that being said, Joel Embiid and Giannis are both reasonably, I'd say, separated from Nikola Jokic, who is the MVP frontrunner in my books. There's Jokic, then there's a good gap, and then I would say there's Giannis and Embiid. Jokic's case is just, he's the MVP. He's the MVP, and I want you to change my mind. There is no way that man doesn't deserve his second MVP in a row for the heavy lifting and the miracle work, frankly, that he has done with this Nuggets team. That's gonna do it for me today. That one ran a little bit longer than I think, or than I was anticipating, I'm not gonna lie. But there were some really good topics that I just really wanted to dive into, and so shout outs to everybody that sent those in. Those are great. I really enjoyed them. Now, to reiterate from the beginning of the video, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. The road to 1K marches on, and be a part of that road. Come with. And if you're new here, also drop a like. Even if you're not new here, drop a like. What am I saying? Just dropping a like makes such a difference for me, so do it. Do it. Yeah, that's gonna do things for me here today. It's been JJ Buckets. It's been a pleasure, and I will see everybody next time.